Luke Carson floated in the cold silence of space, his ship creaking softly as it drifted near the edge of an old mining colony. He was alone, like always, scanning for anything worth salvaging. The job was boring most days, but it paid enough to keep him alive and moving between forgotten places. The signal came through late in his shift, faint, broken, but unmistakable. A distress call. It was weak, buried under static, but something about it made him pause. Most signals out here were old or fake. Real ones didn't last long in deep space. He adjusted the frequency, filtering out noise until the voice came through clearer. It wasn't human. The words were strange, high-pitched and layered, like multiple voices speaking at once. Whoever was sending it was desperate. Luke frowned and checked the coordinates. The source was deep inside a dense asteroid belt, a place most pilots avoided unless they had good reason. Navigation would be tricky. One wrong move and his ship would be crushed between two rocks the size of buildings. But curiosity got the better of him. Maybe it was salvage. Maybe it was something more. Either way, he needed to see for himself. He guided his ship carefully into the belt, eyes scanning the radar for movement. The asteroids passed by slowly, casting long shadows in the dim light of a dying sun. Minutes turned into 20, then 30. Finally he saw it, a wrecked vessel wedged between two large rocks, half buried in debris. It was alien. Sleek, curved, with panels that shimmered faintly even in the dark. No flags or markings he recognized. Just silence. He docked cautiously, tethering his ship to what looked like an emergency hatch. The seal held. He opened it slowly, air still inside. That was a good sign. Inside, the ship was damaged. Lights flickered, wires hung from the ceiling. There was no sound, except for the soft hum of failing systems. Luke moved forward with care, hand on his sidearm, though he didn't expect trouble. Then he saw her. She was lying on the floor, curled around something small. Her skin was pale blue, glowing slightly in the dim light. 3 long fingers clutched at a broken pod beside her. Her breathing was shallow. She was barely alive. Luke dropped to one knee, checking for signs of life. She stirred slightly when he touched her arm, her large black eyes fluttering open for a moment before closing again. He radioed back to his ship, activating the onboard medical drone. It wouldn't do much, but it could stabilize her until he got her aboard. As gently as he could, he lifted her. She was lighter than she looked. The pod she had been holding cracked open slightly as he moved it aside, revealing a small, empty chamber inside. Something had been here once, but not anymore. He carried her back to his ship, heart pounding. This wasn't just salvage. This was something else. Something bigger. Once aboard, he laid her down and started the emergency protocols. Fluids pumped into her system. Oxygen flowed. Her pulse steadied. He watched her sleep, wondering who she was, where she came from, and what happened to whatever she had been protecting. He didn't know it yet, but this moment would change everything. That broken pod? It wasn't empty. It had held younglings, 3 of them, and they were still alive somewhere in the wreckage. But for now, all Luke knew was that he had saved a life, and that life would soon save his right back. Luke sat in the dim glow of his ship's medical bay, watching the alien woman breathe. She had been unconscious for 2 days now, her body weak, but slowly responding to the treatments. He had done what he could with the limited supplies he had, stitched wounds, replaced fluids, and kept her warm. But nothing prepared him for how strange she was. Her skin shimmered faintly, shifting colors when the lights changed. Her pulse was fast, 3 beats in a row, like a drum roll. And her blood, it didn't look like blood at all. It was thick and silver, almost metallic. When he touched it, it stuck to his gloves like liquid wire. He had seen plenty of weird things in space, but this was different. She wasn't just alien. She was something new. On the 3rd day, she woke up. It started with a twitch, then a slow flutter of her long eyelids. Luke was sitting nearby eating from a packet of rehydrated eggs when he noticed her looking at him. Her eyes were black, deep and unreadable, but full of questions. He froze mid-bite. She tried to sit up, groaned, and fell back down. Her hand reached out instinctively, searching for something. When she didn't find it, panic flashed across her face. Luke held up his hands, trying to look calm. "Easy," he said, even though he knew she probably didn't understand. "You're safe." She stared at him, blinking slowly. Then, in a voice that sounded like wind through leaves, she spoke, words he didn't know, soft, layered, like music. He shook his head. "I don't understand you." She frowned, looked around, then saw the empty medpod beside her. Her whole body tensed. She sat up fast, ignoring the pain, and scanned the room wildly. Then she spoke again, more urgently. Luke got up slowly and stepped back, not wanting to scare her. He pointed to himself. "Luke," he said. Then he pointed to her. "You?" She didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Her fingers were cold. "Where?" she asked, clearly this time. Luke blinked. She understood some English. He looked around. "You mean, where are we?" he asked slowly. She shook her head. "No." She tapped her chest, then pointed to the wrecked pod. "They were here." "Where are they?" Luke felt a chill run through him. He looked at the broken pod again. He had assumed whatever was inside was gone, but maybe it wasn't. He stood and walked over to the control panel near the med station. He pulled up the footage from when he found the ship. The camera scans showed the wreckage, the corridors, the damage, but also 3 small life signs in separate pods. He turned back to her. "You're young?" he guessed. Her eyes widened. She nodded quickly. Luke swallowed hard. He replayed the footage, zooming in on the 3 containment units still intact in the wreck. They were still there. He looked at her, then back at the screen. "They're alive," he said softly. Her whole body sagged with relief. Tears welled in her eyes. She whispered something in her language, something that sounded like a prayer. Luke wasn't sure what made him do it, but he reached out and gently squeezed her shoulder. "We'll get them," he said. "I promise." She looked at him. Really, looked at him like she was seeing past his face into something deeper. Then she gave a small nod. After that, she wouldn't let him go far. She followed him as best she could, limping behind as he prepped the salvage gear. She didn't speak much, but she watched everything. When he suited up to return to the wreck, she was right behind him, holding on to the wall for support. "You need rest," he told her. She shook her head. "My children," she said simply. He sighed. No arguing with that. As they left the ship and floated toward the wreck once more, Luke couldn't shake the feeling that his life had already changed forever. And that was before they even reached the pods. Luke and the alien woman, who he now knew called herself Zira, floated silently through the wrecked ship. Their lights cut through the darkness, casting long shadows over broken panels and twisted metal. The silence was heavy, broken only by the soft sound of their breathing through their suits. Zira moved slowly, still weak but determined. Luke kept a close eye on her, ready to catch her if she lost balance. They had come back not just to explore, but to find the 3 pods that held her children. They reached the chamber where the scans had shown the life signs. It was deep inside the ship, past collapsed corridors and sealed doors. The room was small, lined with curved walls that pulsed faintly with light. In the center stood 3 tall pods, half covered in dust and debris. Luke's heart pounded as he stepped closer. The pods were cracked in places but still intact. Faint movement could be seen inside each one. Zara gasped softly and rushed forward, placing her hands on the nearest pod. Her fingers traced symbols glowing on its surface. The pod responded, humming to life with a low vibration. "Are they okay?" Luke asked, even though he knew she might not understand. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked at him with wide, hopeful eyes and nodded. With careful precision, she worked the controls, pressing glowing buttons and speaking in her soft, layered language. The pod gave a final hum, then hissed open. Inside was a small creature, no bigger than a human infant. Its skin was pale blue like Zira's, but smoother, more delicate. It breathed slowly, wrapped in a thin, gel-like substance. Zira reached in gently and lifted the child into her arms. Tears ran down her face as she held it close. Luke watched in silence, feeling like he was seeing something sacred. The second pod opened just as easily. Another child, slightly different from the first, blinked awake and let out a soft cry. Zira smiled through her tears and cradled both against her chest. Then came the third. This one was slower to respond. The pod flickered, struggling to maintain power. Zira frowned and tapped faster at the controls. Luke helped, clearing away dust and checking for loose wires. After a tense moment, the pod hissed open. The third child was still inside, curled, up, not moving. Zira pulled it out quickly and pressed her ear to its chest. Luke held his breath. Then she exhaled sharply and whispered something in her language. Relief washed over her face. Alive. She bundled all three into her arms, holding them close as if afraid they would vanish. Luke watched, unsure what to do or say. Finally, she turned to him and spoke clearly. "Thank you." He nodded, swallowing hard. "You're welcome." They carried the children back to Luke's ship, carefully securing each one in the medbay. Zira refused to leave their side, watching over them constantly. She cleaned their skin, checked their breathing, and sang, to them in a voice so soft it felt like wind through trees. Luke sat nearby watching. He had never seen anything like this before. He had spent most of his life alone, fixing broken ships and forgotten things. Now here he was, part of something far bigger. After a while, Zira looked at him and gestured to the smallest of the triplets. She placed it gently in his arms. Luke stiffened. "You want me to hold it?" She nodded. He shifted awkwardly, supporting the child's head. It was lighter than he expected. Its eyes fluttered open, black and deep, and stared at him. Then, without warning, it made a soft chirping sound and reached up with tiny fingers touching his nose. Zira laughed quietly. Luke couldn't help but smile. The child cooed again, curling its fingers around his thumb. In that moment, something changed. He wasn't just a salvage worker anymore. He was part of a family. Luke quickly learned that taking care of 3 alien babies was nothing like fixing a broken engine or patching up a damaged hull. There were no manuals, no diagrams, and certainly no instructions in English. Zira did most of the work at first, showing him how to feed them with nutrient gel stored in small sealed pouches. She demonstrated how to clean their smooth skin after meals and how to tell when they were uncomfortable. But as the days passed, her body began to show signs of exhaustion again. The crash had taken a lot from her, and caring for the younglings drained what little strength she had left. One morning, she sat slumped against the wall of the med bay, watching Luke struggle to hold 2 of the triplets while trying to open a fresh food packet. The third child floated nearby in a harness Zira had rigged up from spare straps. She reached out and gently tapped his arm. "You must learn," she said slowly, her voice still weak. "They need more than just food." Luke looked at her, surprised. "I'm trying," he muttered. Zira gave a small smile. "Watch," she said. She took one of the children into her arms and placed it close to her chest. The baby made a soft chirping sound and curled its fingers around her skin. Then, without warning, a low hum filled the room. It wasn't loud, but it was warm, like a lullaby played through the air itself. The other 2 quieted instantly. "What was that?" Luke asked, eyes wide. "Comfort," Zira replied simply. "They feel it." He watched closely as she repeated the action, humming, softly again. The child in her arms relaxed completely, eyes fluttering shut. Luke hesitated, then tried it himself with the child in his lap. He pressed the baby gently to his chest and made a low humming noise in his throat. Nothing happened at first. Then, slowly the child let out a tiny sigh and curled closer. He blinked. "Well, I'll be damned." Zira chuckled softly. From that moment on, Luke started to get the hang of things. He cleaned the messes, changed the wrappings Zira used instead, of diapers, and even learned how to adjust the ship's lights to match the triplets' sleep cycles. He talked to them constantly, not because he thought they understood, but because Zira said they liked the sound of voices. And something strange happened. He started to enjoy it. He found himself looking forward to their sleepy smiles, their curious little touches, and the way they mimicked his sounds. Sometimes when they were all asleep and the ship was quiet, he would sit near them and just watch. He missed the silence before. Now he couldn't imagine life without their tiny noises filling the cabin. Zira noticed the change in him. One evening, as they sat together near the sleeping younglings, she looked at him and said, "You are good with them." Luke shrugged. "I just do what needs doing." She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "They trust you. That is rare." He looked down at the smallest of the three, who was curled up in his lap, breathing softly. "They're just kids," he said quietly. "They don't know any better." Zira placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "They know enough." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the ship and the steady breathing of the sleeping children. "Then," Zira whispered, "they call you Da." Luke froze. "What?" She nodded. "They have begun to copy your word. They use it when they reach for you." He stared at her, unsure what to say. He hadn't noticed it yet, but now that she mentioned it, he remembered the way the youngest always chirped. When he walked into the room, he swallowed hard. "I didn't ask for this," Zara smiled. "They didn't ask either, and yet, here we are." Luke looked back at the children, feeling something deep inside shift. He wasn't just helping out anymore. He was part of this family, whether he meant to be or not. Luke had never thought much about aliens beyond what he'd read in old news reports or heard from passing traders at spaceports. They were distant, strange, and usually not his problem. But now, two of them were asleep on his lap. One was wrapped in a sling across his chest, and their mother was sitting across from him, watching him with quiet amusement. Zara had started feeling stronger. Her skin had regained its soft glow, and she no longer needed to rest every few hours. She spent most of her time teaching Luke about her people, the Virex. She spoke slowly, carefully choosing words she knew he would understand while drawing symbols in the condensation on the ship's windows to show him meanings. "We are travelers," she explained one evening, pointing to a faded star chart Luke kept on the wall. "We move between stars, trade, learn, share." Luke frowned. "Like merchants?" She nodded. "Yes, but not just goods. Stories, songs, knowledge." He scratched his chin. "So you're like space gypsies?" Sarah tilted her head. "Perhaps, but we do not steal. Only give." Luke gave a small smile. "Guess that makes us different then." She looked at him for a long moment before speaking again. "You have given much already." He shrugged it off. "Just keeping you all alive." But Zara didn't let it go. She reached out and gently placed a hand on one of the sleeping children. "They call you Da. That is not just name. Among my people, it means protector, parent, heart." Luke blinked. "Really?" She nodded. "Those who raise young are honored, even if they are not born to them." He looked down at the child resting against his chest. It stirred slightly, letting out a tiny chirp before settling back to sleep. He swallowed hard. "I didn't plan any of this, you know," Zara smiled. "Few things worth having come with plans." The conversation stayed with him long after she left to check on the ship's systems. He watched the triplets as they slept, curled up together like they were still in the pods. He remembered how helpless they had seemed when he first found them, how scared Zara had been. Now they trusted him. He wasn't sure when it happened, but somewhere between feeding them, cleaning up after them, and learning how to hum them to sleep, he had stopped seeing them as someone else's kids. They were his. And then there was Zara. She was more than just a survivor now. She was clever, kind, and fiercely protective. She had taught him so much. Not just about caring for the children, but about patience, about trust. One night, As they sat together watching the stars drift past the window, she turned to him and said, "My people believe that family is not made by blood but by choice." Luke looked at her. "And what choice did I make?" She smiled. "You chose to care." He didn't answer right away. He looked around the cabin, at the mess of wrappings, the scattered toys he had cobbled together from spare parts, the soft hum of the med bay keeping everything stable. He had chosen something, all right. Maybe not on purpose, but he had chosen this life. He leaned back in his seat and exhaled slowly. "Guess I'm stuck with you guys, huh?" Zara laughed softly. "Yes, you are." And for once, Luke didn't mind. He looked at the three little ones sleeping peacefully and whispered, "Guess that's okay." Because for the first time in a long time, he felt like he belonged somewhere, and that place was here, with them. Luke was halfway through cleaning up after breakfast, or what passed for breakfast in space, when the ship's warning light blinked on. A sharp, high-pitched beep cut through the quiet hum of the cabin. He froze, looking at the control panel. That's not good. Zara looked up from where she was adjusting one of the triplets' sleep harnesses. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the display. "What is it?" "We've been pinged," Luke muttered, pulling up the external sensors. "Someone's scanning us." The screen flickered, showing a new contact approaching fast, a human patrol vessel. Its markings were clear even from this distance. Military grade, authorized, and most likely not friendly to unscheduled ships floating around abandoned zones. Luke cursed under his breath. "They're not supposed to be here." Zara stood quickly, moving closer. "Can we hide?" Luke shook his head. "Not from that kind. They've already got our signal. We're caught." He tapped the comms button with a sigh. "This is salvage vessel Voyant. Unidentified ship, state your purpose." A voice crackled through the speaker, cold and formal. "Voyant. This is patrol vessel Delta 4. You are operating in restricted, salvage zone 12B. Prepare for inspection." Luke glanced at Zara. She held his gaze, then gently placed a hand on his arm. "Tell them the truth." He wasn't sure if that was the best idea, but he didn't have time to argue. "Copy that. Delta 4, he said into the mic. "Stand by." He turned to Zara. "You sure about this?" She nodded. "Better than hiding." Luke exhaled sharply and opened the docking bay. Minutes later, boots echoed through the corridor as two armed officers stepped inside, helmets. "On, weapons ready. Hands where we can see them," one of them barked. Luke raised his hand slowly. "Easy. I'm just a salvager." The officer scanned the room, then noticed Zara standing nearby. His eyes widened slightly, but he kept his stance firm. "Who's that?" Luke hesitated. "A survivor." The second officer stepped forward, looking past him. "Survivor of what?" Before Luke could answer, the sound of soft chirping filled the air. All heads turned toward the med bay. The door slid open slightly, revealing one of the triplets peeking out, curious and unafraid. The officers stiffened. "What the hell is that?" One of them whispered. Luke took a deep breath. "3 of those." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. "You're telling me there are 3 of them on board?" Zara stepped forward, raising her hand slowly in what she hoped was a peaceful gesture. "We mean no harm," she said clearly. The officers flinched at hearing her speak. One of them lifted his weapon slightly. "Don't," Luke warned, stepping between them. "They're not a threat." "You don't know that," the first officer snapped. Just then, another sound filled the room. Not words, not exactly. It was more like a soft vibration in the air, low and warm. All 3 adults turned to see the triplets still in the doorway, staring at them eyes wide. Then, without warning, the lights in the cabin flickered. The officers staggered back, shaking their heads as if waking from a dream. "What the hell was that?" one of them gasped. Luke stared at the child. "I think they just talked." Zara smiled faintly. "They are trying to show peace." The officers looked shaken, unsure whether to believe what they had just felt more than heard. "Get back," one of them ordered again. though his voice lacked confidence now. Luke stepped forward carefully. Look, I know this looks weird, but they're just kids, and she's their mother. The silence stretched. Finally, one of the officers lowered his weapon slightly. This has to be reported. Luke swallowed hard. Yeah, I figured. But Zara's smile faded. She knew what that meant. Reporting them meant others would come, and not all of them would come in peace. Luke watched as the patrol vessel pulled away, its engines flaring before it vanished into the stars. The moment it was gone, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Zara stood near the window, her arms wrapped around one of the triplets. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp, thinking, calculating. They'll send more, she said quietly. Luke nodded. Yeah, probably soon. He turned back to the control panel, scanning for any new signals or approaching ships. So far, the space around them was still empty, but that wouldn't last long. He looked at the children. They were playing now, floating gently in their harnesses, chirping at each other in soft tones, unaware of what had just happened, unaware of what might come next. But Zara wasn't. Neither was Luke. He sat down across from her. What did they do back there? With the lights and the hum? Zara reached out and gently touched the child in her lap. They are gifted, she said. Among my people, some young are born with the ability to connect, to feel others, to speak without words. Luke frowned. You mean like telepathy? She tilted her head slightly. Not exactly. It is more than thought. It is feeling, emotion, harmony. He rubbed his temples. So they can make people feel things? She nodded. Yes, and when they are together, it is stronger. The three of them. They are a chorus. Luke blinked. A what? A trio, she explained. They share a bond deeper than most siblings. When they sing together, their voices carry meaning beyond sound. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. So they're not just kids, they're like alien diplomats? Zara gave a small smile. In a way, among the Virex, those like them are rare. They are meant to bring peace between species. Luke looked at her. Then why were you running? Her smile faded. Because not all beings seek peace. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Luke asked, Where were you going when your ship crashed? Zara hesitated, then spoke slowly. We were searching for safe passage. Our kind wishes to trade with humans, to learn from you. But many fear us. They see only what is different. Luke shook his head. That's stupid. She looked at him. Is it? He sighed. Look, I get it, you're not human, you don't look like us, talk like us, or act like us, but these three? He pointed to the children. They're just babies. They didn't ask for this wariness, they just want to be safe. Zara studied him for a long moment. And you? Do you fear us? Luke looked at the children again. They were watching him now, tilting their heads the same way she did when they were curious. He smiled. No, I don't. Zara placed a hand on his arm. Then you understand more than most. Just then, the ship's alarm blared again. Luke jumped up, rushing to the controls. Another signal. Closer this time, not military, civilian. He frowned. Someone else is coming. Zara stood quickly. Who? Luke scanned the readout. Can't tell yet, but they're fast. He looked at her. If it's not the patrol ship, then who? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she moved to the children, gently securing them in their sleep harnesses. We must leave, she said. Now. Luke stared at her. Wait, what if they're friendly? She shook her head. It does not matter. Once the humans know about us, others will follow. Scientists, traders, soldiers. Luke swallowed hard. You think they'll hurt? You? Some will, she said simply. Some always do. Luke looked at the children again. They were quiet now, sensing the tension. Their black eyes followed every movement, every word. He took a deep breath. Then we go. Zara nodded. Yes. But where? Luke thought for a moment. Then he grinned slightly. Somewhere no one would think to look. He tapped the navigation system, pulling up an old map, a forgotten route, a place deep in uncharted space. Somewhere safe. Zara stepped beside him, looking at the screen. You trust me? He asked. She met his gaze. I already do. And with that, he fired up the engines. The ship shuddered as it came to life. They were leaving. Together. Luke had flown through asteroid belts, jumped through unstable wormholes, and docked with ships twice his size. But nothing scared him more than the first time one of the triplets got sick. It started with a low whine from Kai. At first, Luke thought it was just tiredness. The kids had been active all day, bouncing around the cabin in their harnesses, chirping at each other like tiny alien birds. But then Kai's skin dimmed, his glow fading to a dull gray. He stopped responding to touch, curling into himself like a flower closing at night. Zara noticed immediately. She scooped him up, pressing her ear to his chest, eyes narrowing as she listened to something Luke couldn't hear. What's wrong? He asked, already moving toward the medbay. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she laid Kai down on the padded surface and began scanning him with a small device she had salvaged from her wrecked ship. Lights flickered across its screen, showing symbols Luke couldn't read. Finally, she spoke. His core is cold. Luke frowned. Core? She pointed to the center of Kai's chest. Here. They store warmth here. If it drops too low, they sleep. If it drops further... She trailed off, not needing to finish. Luke swallowed hard. Okay. So how do we warm him up? Zara moved quickly, adjusting the temperature controls on the med bay while wrapping Kai in a thick thermal blanket. She placed her hands on either side of his head and hummed softly, low and steady, like a heartbeat. The sound filled the room. Nia and Tulo, who had been watching quietly, responded by climbing onto the table beside their brother. They curled close to him, placing their hands on his arms, joining in the hum. Luke stood back, heart pounding. Then, slowly, Kai's color returned. His glow brightened. His breathing deepened. He opened his eyes. Zara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Nia and Tulo chirped happily, nudging their brother playfully. Luke exhaled sharply. That was terrifying. Zara looked at him. You are learning. He shook his head. I barely did anything. She smiled gently. You stayed. You watched. You cared. Luke rubbed the back of his neck. Guess I did. After that, things changed again. He became more than just someone who fed them or cleaned up after them. He became part of their rhythm. When they woke, they reached for him. When they were scared, they called his name. When they played, they tried to copy his voice, stretching their strange little sounds into something that almost sounded like words. One evening as he sat with them in the main cabin, Tulo suddenly looked at him and said, "Duh." Luke froze. What? He whispered. Tulo tilted his head. Then, louder this time. "Da." Nia turned, blinking. "Da," she repeated. Kai chimed in next. "Da-da." Luke stared at them, stunned. Zara laughed softly. They have chosen. He looked at her. Chosen what? She gestured toward the children. Their parent. Luke felt something tighten in his chest. But I'm not. She cut him off with a look. In our tongue, da means more than blood. It means safety, love, home. He swallowed hard, looking at the three little faces staring up at him, waiting for a response. He had spent most of his life alone, drifting from job to job, never staying anywhere long enough to make roots. He had always told himself he liked it that way. But now he had 3 kids who trusted him completely. A woman who believed in him without question. And a life he never saw coming. He looked at Zara, then back at the children, and finally he smiled. Okay, he said softly. Okay then. The word settled between them like a promise. From that moment on, he wasn't just helping out. He wasn't just watching over them, he was their dad, whether he meant to be or not. Luke had always thought of space as a place of silence. Stars burned in quiet, ships drifted without sound, and even the largest explosions happened in eerie stillness. But now, he knew better. Space could be loud, not with noise, but with meaning. He and Zara had been traveling for months, staying far from human-controlled zones. They had found an old research station orbiting a forgotten moon, abandoned but still functional. It was the closest thing to a home they could find. The Triplets had grown quickly, their bodies stronger, their voices clearer. They were learning to speak more English every day, mixing it with their own language in ways that made Zara smile and shake her head. One afternoon, while Luke was fixing a broken oxygen line, Nia came running into the maintenance room, chirping, excitedly. "Da! Da!" she called, tugging on his sleeve. He looked down at her. "What's wrong?" She pointed toward the main cabin. "People!" His heart skipped a beat. He followed her quickly, boots thudding against the metal floor. Zira was already there, standing near the viewport, watching a small shuttle approach. It wasn't military. It wasn't hostile. It was civilian. The shuttle landed gently outside the station. Moments later, a hatch opened, and 3 figures stepped out. 2 men and a woman, all wearing standard exploration suits. They raised their hands slowly, showing they meant no harm. Luke hesitated, then opened the airlock. The woman stepped forward first. She had short brown hair and tired eyes, but she smiled when she saw him. "Hello?" she said carefully. "We picked up strange energy readings. Didn't expect, well, this." Luke crossed his arms. "You're not supposed to be here." The woman nodded. "No, we're not. But we saw your signal. You're broadcasting on open channel." Zara stepped beside Luke, silent but watchful. The second man spoke up. "We're researchers, independent. We heard the signal, followed it. We weren't sure what we'd find." Luke glanced at Zara. She gave the smallest nod. He sighed. "Come, inside." The 3 visitors stepped into the station, looking around in awe. They hadn't seen anything like it before. Curved walls, glowing panels, strange tools scattered across tables. Then they saw the children. Naya, Kai, and Tulo stood together near the kitchen area, watching the newcomers with wide eyes. The woman took a sharp breath. "Are they?" Luke nodded. "Yeah." The room fell silent. Then softly Nia tilted her head and said, "Hi." Everyone turned to look at her. The woman blinked. "She just spoke?" Kai stepped forward next, pointing at the man with the glasses. "Hello." The man laughed nervously. Hello." Tulo, ever the bold one, walked right up to them and placed his small hand on the woman's arm. Instantly, the room filled with a soft hum. Not loud, not scary, just warm. The woman gasped, eyes widening. The 2 men staggered slightly, looking around as if waking from a dream. Zara watched closely. "They are showing peace." The woman swallowed hard. "I felt something, like calm, like trust." Luke looked at the kids. "They do that sometimes." The woman turned to Zara. "Can you understand them?" Zara nodded. "Yes, but now so can you." The researcher looked stunned. "How?" Zara gestured to the children. "They reach through words, through feeling. They share what they know, not just what they say." The woman stepped back, clearly overwhelmed. "This changes everything." Luke frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked at him like he had just handed her the key to the universe. "If they can communicate like this, if they can make people feel what they mean, then we don't need translators. We don't need weapons. We just need to listen." Zara met Luke's eyes. He understood. This was bigger than hiding. Bigger than running. This was proof. Proof that humans and aliens could understand each other, without fear, without war, just by listening. And for the first time since finding Zara in that wrecked ship, Luke realized something. He wasn't just raising alien kids. He was helping build a future, a peaceful one. And maybe, just maybe, the universe was ready to hear them sing. The stars stretched far across the dark sky like tiny eyes watching over the galaxy. Among them floated a world of gold towers and purple skies, known as Vathara Prime. This was the heart of the mighty Vathari Empire, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in space. On this world lived Princess Ilara Vathari, daughter of the Empress and heir to the throne. She was tall, graceful, and had silver hair that shimmered like moonlight. Her eyes were deep blue, filled with wisdom beyond her years. Many called her beautiful, but beauty was not what made her strong. Her mind and will were. Ilara had everything a royal could ever want: power, riches, knowledge, and respect. Yet something was missing. Suitors came from all corners of the galaxy, each claiming to be worthy of her hand. They brought gifts of crystal cities, ancient weapons, and even entire moons wrapped in silk-like energy fields. But none truly impressed. One day, standing on a balcony high above the capital city, she made a decision. She would not marry just anyone who bowed and flattered her. She would only accept someone who proved themselves through trial. So she sent out a message across the stars. Any suitor who wished to win her heart must pass 3 trials. These trials were said to be deadly, crafted by the greatest minds of her people. No one had ever returned after entering them. Still, the message spread fast. Ships flew through wormholes and jumped between stars, bringing warriors, kings, scholars, and beasts to Vathara Prime. Some came in shining armor, others in robes stitched with spells. They spoke 1,000 languages and carried weapons from forgotten wars. They all believed they were special. They believed they were ready. But none came back. Weeks passed. Then, months. The line of suitors grew longer, but so did the list of failures. Some were broken by fear, others by pride or greed. The trials did not care how strong or clever you were. They tested the soul. In the halls of the palace, whispers grew louder. The nobles began to worry. If no one could pass the trials, who would sit beside Ilara on the throne? Some feared she would rule alone forever, while others thought she might never marry at all. Yet Ilara remained calm. She watched from her tower as another suitor entered the gates. He was a warlord from the Twin Sun system, covered in scars and wearing armor forged from blackened star metal. He walked with confidence, but his eyes showed doubt. He too vanished into the trials. Days passed. Nothing. Then, one morning, a servant ran through the palace screaming. The warlord had been found, half dead, curled up near the trial entrance, whispering about shadows that screamed his name. After that, fewer suitors came. Word spread that the trials were not just hard, they were cruel. They didn't just test strength or skill. They tore open your past and forced you to face it. Many gave up. Until one day, a small ship landed outside the palace gates. It looked old and tired, patched together with parts from other ships. It bore no flags, no noble symbols, no signs of wealth or power. From it stepped a man named Jake Harlow. He wore a faded pilot jacket and boots that had seen better days. His hair was messy, and he looked more confused than confident. He wasn't here because he wanted a kingdom. He wasn't even sure why he was there. He had heard about the trials in a bar on a dusty planet far away. The bartender told him it was a death sentence. That made him laugh. Maybe that was why he signed up. Now, standing at the gates of the great palace, he looked up at the golden towers and whispered to himself, "Well, here goes nothing."